Commander Lee Mina touched the silver Peacekeeper badge on her uniform as she looked out the transport window. The planet Zirion 7 floated in space ahead of them, looking like a damaged gem. Its surface was covered with deep scars from many years of fighting between two powerful groups, the Korthak Empire and the Zephyrian Trade Coalition. The young officer sitting next to her checked his computer screen. "Commander, both sides are sending us permission codes to land. They have agreed to follow the diplomatic protection rules," said Lieutenant Park Tai, her helper for this mission. Mina nodded and picked up her datapad to read the files about this conflict one more time. She had done this job for many years and had successfully stopped 15 wars before they could start. Each group was different, but she understood how they thought. The Korthak people respected power and strength above everything else. The Zephyrian traders only cared about making money. It would take time and patience, but she could find a way to make both sides happy. Their ship landed smoothly on the planet's surface. Important people from both fighting groups came to meet her at the neutral meeting place, a special area where no fighting was allowed. They spoke polite words and followed all the correct ceremonies. Everything seemed normal and peaceful. For 3 whole days, the talks went very well. Mina listened to both sides explain what they wanted. The Korthak Empire said they needed the planet's valuable metals to build weapons for their army. The Zephyrian Coalition wanted to mine the same metals to sell for huge profits across the galaxy. Both groups had been fighting over this planet for so long that many people had died. Mina worked hard to find a solution that would help everyone. She suggested they could share the planet's resources. The Korthak could have the metals they needed for their military, while the Zephyrians could mine other areas and sell to different planets. Zirion 7 would remain neutral territory, belonging to neither side but helping both. The representatives seemed interested in her plan. They asked many questions and discussed details late into the night. Mina felt hopeful that another war could be prevented. She had seen too much death and destruction in her career, and every peace agreement meant thousands of lives would be saved. On the morning of the 4th day, something went terribly wrong. Mina woke up to the sound of heavy boots marching outside her quarters. When she looked through the window, she saw Korthak soldiers completely surrounding the diplomatic building. They carried large weapons and wore the dark armor of the Empire's military. The door to her room burst open. A tall, fierce-looking Korthak general stepped inside, followed by 6 armed soldiers. His alien features were twisted with anger, and he spoke through a small electronic device that translated his words into human language. "Commander Lee Mina," he said in a loud, harsh voice, "you are now under arrest for the crime of espionage against the mighty Korthak Empire." Mina stayed calm, even though her heart began beating faster. She had been in dangerous situations before, but this was different. She slowly moved her hand toward the emergency signal device on her belt, hoping to call for help. "I claim diplomatic immunity under Galactic Concord Resolution 847, she said clearly and firmly. This was a law that protected all peacekeepers from being arrested or harmed while doing their job. Every civilized species in the galaxy had agreed to follow this rule. General Vorthak laughed in a cruel way. "Your immunity means nothing here. We have proof that you sent secret military information to coalition forces. You are a spy disguised as a peacekeeper." Mina knew this was impossible. She had never sent any messages except official diplomatic reports. But when they showed her the evidence, she realized what had happened. The Korthak had created fake computer files that made it look like she was working for their enemies. The forgeries were very poorly made, so bad that even a student could tell they were false. But the Korthak military court did not care about the truth. The trial happened the same day and lasted only 6 hours. No real witnesses were called, and Mina was not allowed to defend herself properly. The Korthak judges had already decided she was guilty before the trial even began. They wanted to send a message to the galaxy that no one should interfere with their plans to expand their empire. "The sentence is death by disintegration," announced the chief judge. "The execution will take place at sunrise tomorrow. Let this be a warning to all who would stand against the Korthak Empire." Mina spent her last night in a small prison cell, thinking about her family back on Earth and all the people she had helped save during her career. She was not afraid to die, but she was sad that her death might start an even bigger war. The next morning, they brought her to a public square where thousands of Korthak citizens had gathered to watch. Large cameras recorded everything to broadcast across 17 star systems. General Vorthak wanted everyone in the galaxy to see what happened to those who opposed the Korthak Empire. As the terrible disintegrator weapon reduced Commander Lee Mina to nothing but scattered atoms, the Korthak celebrated their show of power. They thought they had won a great victory and proven their strength to all their enemies. But they had made the worst mistake in their empire's history. They had killed an innocent human peacekeeper, and soon they would learn what happened when humanity's patience finally ended. Deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, in a secret military base that had been locked away for 40 years, red warning lights began flashing for the first time since the Centauri Rebellion. The Human War Council was being called together, and every important leader knew this meant something terrible had happened. Admiral Kim Jun walked quickly through the dark hallways of Lunar Base, his heavy boots echoing off the metal walls. His face looked older than his 60 years, marked by many battles and difficult decisions. Behind him followed the most powerful people in human space, generals, ambassadors, intelligence officers, and defense ministers. None of them had ever seen the admiral look so angry. The council meeting room was a large, circular chamber carved deep into the moon's rock. In the center sat a black table made of polished stone, surrounded by chairs for 20 people. Holographic screens floated in the air above the table, showing news reports from across the galaxy. But one image played over and over again, the execution of Commander Lee Mina. Kim Jun sat down heavily in the chair at the head of the table. His weathered hands gripped the armrests as he watched the terrible scene repeat on the screens. The other council members took their seats, their faces showing the same mixture of shock, sadness, and growing rage. Ambassador Choi Yuna spoke first, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. She was normally a calm, diplomatic woman who always tried to solve problems with words instead of weapons. But today was different. The Galactic Concord sent an official complaint to the Korthak Empire, she reported. They dismissed it in less than 4 hours. The Korthak say that what happens in their territory is their business, and no galactic treaties can tell them what to do. Defense Minister Han Wu leaned forward across the table. He was a large, strong man who had fought in 3 major wars. His voice was deep and serious as he spoke. Admiral, the reaction from our people has been unlike anything I have ever seen. On New Sol Colony, hundreds of thousands of humans are marching in the streets, demanding revenge. The same thing is happening on Busan Station and every other human world. They are calling for war, and they will not accept anything less. Kim Jun looked around the table at each person sitting there. These were military commanders who had won great battles, diplomats who had prevented wars, and spy chiefs who knew the galaxy's darkest secrets. But today, they all had the same expression on their faces, cold, calculating fury that burned like ice in their hearts. The admiral stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but filled with deadly purpose. The Korthak executed a peacekeeper, he said, each word carefully chosen. They murdered someone whose only crime was trying to stop a war and save lives. His fist suddenly slammed down on the table, making everyone jump. And they broadcast her death like it was some kind of entertainment show for their people to enjoy. General Song Hai, the commander of humanity's Third Fleet, raised her hand. She was known throughout the military as a brilliant strategist who could win battles with fewer ships than anyone thought possible. What options do we have, Admiral? She asked. How do we respond to this? Kim Jun's answer came without any hesitation, as if he had already made his decision before entering the room. Complete withdrawal from all galactic treaties, he said firmly. We cut off all diplomatic relations with every government that refuses to condemn this murder. And we activate Protocol Black. The room became completely silent. Everyone knew about Protocol Black, but it had never been used. It was a set of war plans created during humanity's most fearful and paranoid times, when they worried that alien species might try to destroy Earth. Protocol Black meant war without any rules, without mercy, without the civilized limits that normally controlled how battles were fought in the galaxy. Ambassador Choi Yuna looked worried as she spoke carefully. Admiral, if we abandon the conventions of war that have kept peace in the galaxy for centuries. Kim Jun interrupted her, his decision now as solid as ice. They abandoned those conventions first when they killed an innocent peacekeeper. He stood up and walked to the holographic displays, pointing at the image of Mina's execution. The Korthak wanted to show the galaxy what happens when someone crosses them and interferes with their plans. The Admiral turned back to face the council, and several people stepped back when they saw his expression. His smile was cold and terrifying, like winter itself. Now let's show them what happens when someone crosses humanity. Within 2 hours of the council meeting's end, orders were sent to every human military base, space station, and warship in the galaxy. Soldiers who had been on leave were called back to duty. Ships that had been in repair docks were rushed back into service. Weapons that had never been used outside of testing ranges were loaded onto transport vessels. Ambassador Park Minute, humanity's representative to the Galactic Concord, requested an emergency session of the galactic government. When all the alien species had gathered in their great assembly hall, he delivered humanity's final diplomatic message in a calm, clear voice that everyone could hear. Commander Lee Mina died under a flag of peace, trying to prevent war and save lives. The Korthak Empire has violated the most sacred law of civilization, the protection of those who come in peace. There will be no negotiations with the murderers. There will be no prisoners taken. There will be no mercy shown until justice is served and the guilty are punished. As Park Minute left the assembly hall, the alien representatives began to understand that something had fundamentally changed. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had always been so careful to restrain themselves in previous conflicts. The darkness of space suddenly filled with ships that appeared like ghosts from a nightmare. Across 17 different Korthak star systems at exactly the same moment, human fleets emerged from hyperspace travel. But these were not the same human ships that other species had seen before. These vessels looked strange and frightening, bending space and time around them in ways that made them nearly impossible to see clearly or target with weapons. Admiral Lim Su stood on the bridge of her flagship, a massive warship called the HNS Retribution. This ship was completely different from any human vessel ever built before. While older human ships were designed to defend Earth and its colonies, this new class of warship had been created for only one purpose: to fight a war with no rules and no mercy. The bridge was dark except for the glow of computer screens showing tactical information. Lim Su was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her entire adult life in the human navy, working her way up from a junior officer to become one of their most respected admirals. But today, she felt different. Today, she was not fighting to defend something. Today, she was fighting for revenge. "Admiral, we have arrived at Korthak Prime," reported her navigation officer. Through the main viewing screen, she could see the enemy's home planet floating in space, surrounded by their defensive fleets and orbital stations. "Begin deployment of the embargo swarms," Lim Su ordered in a calm voice that showed no emotion. From the human ships, millions of tiny robots no bigger than insects spread out through the entire star system. These nanobots were controlled by advanced artificial intelligence and moved faster than any pilot could follow. Within hours, they had formed a complete barrier around the planet and every moon, space station, and asteroid in the system. Nothing could get in or out, no ships, no messages, no supplies of any kind. The Korthak military tried to fight the nanobots, but it was like trying to swat millions of flies with a hammer. Their weapons were too big and slow to hit the tiny machines, and there were far too many of them to destroy. Communications Officer Jung Bin looked up from his console with a surprised expression. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from General Vorthak. He is requesting permission to talk with you." Lim Su did not even look away from her tactical display, which showed the positions of every human ship and enemy target in the system. "Request denied," she said simply. She pressed a button on her command chair to open a channel to the engineering ships that had accompanied her fleet. "Begin stellar modification procedures immediately." What happened next had never been seen before in the history of galactic warfare. The human engineering vessels, which looked more like mobile factories than warships, moved toward the system's sun. They began positioning enormous collection devices around the star, machines that could literally steal the energy from a sun and store it for human use. The Korthak people on their home planet watched in growing terror as their sun began to grow dimmer day by day. The temperature on their world started to drop as the humans harvested more and more of their star's energy. Ice began forming on the edges of their great cities, and their leaders realized they were facing an enemy unlike anything they had ever imagined. General Vorthak's voice crackled over the communication systems, filled with anger and fear. "This is a violation of the Galactic War Accords. You cannot use stars as weapons. This is against every law of civilized warfare." For the first time since arriving in the system, Admiral Lim Su responded to the enemy general. Her voice was broadcast on every communication channel in the system, so that every Korthak citizen could hear her words. "We are no longer bound by accords that you have already broken," she said in a voice as cold as the ice now forming on their planet. "Return Commander Lee Mina's remains to us with full military honors, or watch your homeworld freeze in eternal darkness." The same scene was happening in 16 other Korthak star systems at the exact same time. Human fleets had arrived everywhere at once, isolating entire worlds and cutting them off from each other. But the humans were not trying to invade these planets or capture their resources. They had a different goal: they wanted justice for their murdered Peacekeeper, and they were willing to destroy an entire civilization to get it. The Korthak military had been built around ideas of honor and glory in battle. Their soldiers were trained to fight enemy armies face to face, to capture territory, and to expand their empire's borders. They had no idea how to fight against an enemy that treated war like a surgical operation, precise, methodical, and completely without emotion. On the frozen moons of Korthak Beta, General Nam Ki led human ground forces that moved through the enemy's defenses like shadows in the night. His soldiers were not trying to kill every enemy they found. Instead, they attacked only military bases and government buildings, leaving civilian populations alone but completely cutting them off from their leaders and military commanders. The humans fought in a way that confused and terrified the Korthak warriors. They seemed to know exactly where every important target was located. They struck with perfect timing and disappeared before the enemy could respond. They used weapons that disabled rather than destroyed, tactics that isolated rather than conquered. One captured Korthak officer, when questioned by human interrogators, spoke words that would be remembered long after the war ended: "They are not fighting like soldiers. They are fighting like death itself, silent, unstoppable, and absolutely certain." 6 months had passed since the human fleets first appeared in Korthak space like ghosts from a nightmare. During this time, the galaxy had watched in growing fear as humanity showed a side of themselves that no one had ever seen before. The great meeting hall of the Galactic Concord, which normally hosted peaceful discussions about trade agreements and border disputes, was now filled with worried representatives from dozens of alien species, all trying to figure out what they called the human problem. The enormous chamber was built like a giant bowl, with seats arranged in circles that rose up toward a crystal dome ceiling. Thousands of beings from across known space had gathered here, some breathing oxygen like humans, others requiring special environmental suits, and a few existing as pure energy contained in mechanical bodies. All of them were afraid. Coordinator Zephys of the Trade Coalition stood at the center speaking platform, his blue skin shimmering under the bright lights. His people were merchants and businessmen who preferred making money to making war, but even they were terrified by what humanity had done to the Korthak Empire. "The humans have violated 17 different articles of the Galactic War Accords," he announced, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "Their siege tactics are crimes against civilization itself. They are slowly freezing entire worlds to death and cutting off billions of innocent people from food and medicine." High Architect Crystal Lees, a being made of living crystal who spoke through musical tones that were translated into words, clicked sounds of disapproval. "We tried to punish them with trade sanctions, refusing to buy their products or sell them our resources. But it has not worked at all. The humans appear to be completely self-sufficient. They do not need anything from us." At the bottom of the chamber sat a single table, placed there for defendants who were accused of crimes against galactic law. President Yo Jin of the Human Systems Alliance sat alone at this table, looking calm and peaceful despite being surrounded by thousands of angry alien representatives who wanted to condemn her people. Yo Jin was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. She had been a diplomat for 30 years, working to keep peace between humans and other species. But today she looked different, harder, colder, like steel that had been forged in fire. When the chamber speaker called her name, she stood up slowly and walked to the center platform. Every eye in the enormous room focused on her as she began to speak, her voice clear and strong enough to reach every corner of the vast space. Commander Lee Mina was guaranteed safe passage under laws that this very body created and voted to approve, she began, looking directly at each group of representatives as she spoke. She was not executed for crimes she committed, because she committed no crimes. She was murdered to send a message of Korthak dominance to the galaxy. Her voice grew stronger and filled with controlled anger. "You speak now of violated accords and broken laws? Where were these sacred accords when our Peacekeeper died? Where were your protests when they broadcast her execution like entertainment for their people to enjoy?" The Andalite ambassador, a tall being with 4 arms and skin like tree bark, stood up in his section of seats. "The human response is completely disproportionate," he shouted. "You have destabilized an entire region of space. Your actions threaten the peace and order we have built over centuries." Yo Jin smiled at his words, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made several alien species representatives step back in fear, even though they were sitting far away from her. Something in her eyes made them remember that humans were predators who had climbed to the top of their world's food chain. "You believe this is disproportionate?" she asked, her voice now dangerously quiet. "You think what we have done so far is too much?" She paused and looked around the entire chamber. "We haven't even begun to show you what disproportionate really means." As if her words had triggered some hidden signal, holographic displays suddenly activated all throughout the meeting hall. 3-dimensional images appeared in the air, showing human war fleets positioned around 17 different star systems. Each fleet was ready to do to those worlds exactly what they had done to Korthak Prime, slowly steal the energy from their suns and watch entire civilizations freeze in darkness. The alien representatives looked at these images in horror, realizing that humanity had the power to destroy any species that opposed them. Coordinator Zephy stood up again, his voice shaking with fear and anger. "Withdraw your forces immediately," he demanded, "or face economic sanctions from every member of the galactic community. We will cut off all trade with human worlds. We will refuse to share our technology or medicines with you." Yo-Jin's laugh was cold and frightening. "Sanction us," she said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "See how long your economies survive without human technology, human medicine, human agricultural exports." She paused, letting her words sink into the minds of every representative in the chamber. "You treated us as junior partners in galactic affairs because we followed your rules and respected your laws. You mistook our restraint and politeness for weakness." She began walking toward the exit of the great chamber, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent space. Before leaving, she turned back one final time to deliver her last message. "Commander Lee Mina will receive the justice she deserves. The Korthak will answer for their crimes against an innocent peacekeeper. And every single species in this chamber will remember that humans at peace are a choice we make every day, not a limitation of our nature or our capabilities." As President Yo-Jin left the chamber, the thousands of alien representatives sat in complete silence, finally understanding that they had badly misjudged the species they thought they knew. Within hours of the session's end, 3 more species quietly withdrew their objections to human actions, afraid of becoming the next target of humanity's unlimited fury. 18 months had passed since Commander Lee Mina died on that terrible morning on Zerion 7. The Korthak Empire, which had once controlled dozens of star systems and commanded millions of soldiers, no longer existed. What remained was a collection of broken worlds, destroyed fleets, and scattered survivors who had finally realized the true cost of murdering an innocent peacekeeper. Admiral Kim Jun walked slowly through the corridors of Lunar Base, heading toward a special chamber that had been built in the deepest levels of the Moon facility. His footsteps echoed off the metal walls as he passed through security checkpoints and sealed doors. The weight of the past 18 months showed clearly on his weathered face, the decisions he had made, the orders he had given, and the terrible war he had unleashed upon the galaxy. The memorial chamber was a quiet, peaceful room with walls made of polished white stone. In the center stood a crystal coffin containing the restored body of Commander Lee Mina. Human scientists had used genetic samples to reconstruct her remains, allowing her to finally receive the proper burial that had been denied to her when the Korthak disintegrator beam scattered her atoms across space. Kim Jun stopped in front of the coffin and looked down at Mina's peaceful face. She looked exactly as she had in life, a dedicated peacekeeper who had spent her career trying to prevent wars and save lives. He wondered what she would think about the galaxy-wide conflict that her death had started. "Admiral," came a voice from behind him. Kim Jun turned to see Colonel Osu entering the memorial chamber. Osu had been promoted to head of galactic intelligence after the previous director was killed in a Korthak attack on a human space station. The young officer carried a datapad filled with the final reports from the war. "Give me the status report," Kim Jun requested, though his voice sounded tired and heavy. Osu consulted his datapad before speaking. "The last Korthak military holdout surrendered yesterday on the moon of Korthak 7. General Vorthak and all members of his military tribunal are now in human custody, waiting for trial. The moderate Korthak provisional government has formally apologized for Commander Mina's execution and agreed to pay reparations to her family and to human space." Kim Jun nodded slowly, but his expression remained serious and troubled. "What about the response from other galactic species?" "The Galactic Concord has been completely restructured," Osu replied. "Humans now hold permanent seats on all major councils that make decisions about galactic law and order. The other species have formally recognized what they are calling the Mina Doctrine: any harm done to human peacekeepers or diplomats will result in unrestricted warfare until justice is served." Through the chamber's viewing window, Kim Jun could see human warships patrolling the space lanes that surrounded Earth's solar system. These same ships were now stationed throughout the galaxy, in star systems that had once been controlled by other alien governments. Humanity had emerged from the war as the galaxy's dominant military power, but this victory had come at a terrible cost. Have we become the very thing we fought against? Kim Jun asked quietly, more to himself than to the colonel standing beside him. The question had been troubling him for months as he watched humanity transform from peaceful explorers into galactic conquerors. Osu thought carefully about his answer before speaking. He was a thoughtful man who had seen the war from beginning to end, and he understood the moral complexity of what they had done. "We showed them who we really are, sir," he said finally. "Every species in the galaxy has a breaking point, a line that cannot be crossed without terrible consequences. The Korthak found ours when they executed an innocent peacekeeper and broadcast her death like entertainment." "And now what happens?" Kim Jun asked. "How do we move forward from here?" "Now they know the truth about human civilization," Osu replied. "Our politeness, our willingness to follow rules, our preference for peace over war, none of these things come from weakness or inability to fight. They come from choice. We can be the galaxy's peacekeepers, helping to resolve conflicts and maintain order. Or we can be its conquerors, using our military power to control other species through fear." Osu gestured toward the window where human ships could be seen patrolling space. "The decision about which path to take has always been ours to make. Now the rest of the galaxy understands this as well." Kim Jun turned away from Mina's memorial and began walking toward the chamber's exit. In just 18 months, humanity had transformed from cautious participants in galactic politics to the undisputed masters of known space. They had proven that their previous restraint in conflicts had not been because they lacked the ability to wage total war, it had been because they chose to show mercy to their enemies. The galaxy would never again make the mistake of testing that mercy or pushing humanity beyond its breaking point. Every alien species now understood what happened when humans were truly provoked, not the limited, civilized warfare they had shown before, but total, unrestricted conflict that would continue until justice was served. As he left the memorial chamber, Kim Jun found himself wondering if Mina would have approved of what her death had unleashed across the galaxy. Would she have wanted her murder to start a war that reshaped the balance of power among all known species? Perhaps it didn't matter now. Justice had been served, the guilty had been punished, and the stars themselves had witnessed a simple truth about the universe. There were beings you could negotiate with, beings you could defeat in battle, and beings you should never, ever cross. Humanity, every species now realized, belonged firmly in the third category. The galaxy had learned this lesson 18 months too late, but they would never forget it again.